Hey there, and welcome to Authentically ADHD. I'm your host, Carmen, and I am so glad that you're here. This is a podcast where we get real about ADHD. No filters, no judgment, a safe space to explore and learn and grow. If you're here, it's because you want to take a deep dive into the world of ADHD, and trust me, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. Now, you're probably wondering, why did I start this podcast? Well, in true ADHD fashion, it all started very impulsively. One day, I thought, I should start a podcast, especially with all this paperwork that I have and all these notes that I have trying to understand my own ADHD. And the next thing I knew, here I am, sharing thoughts with you. I don't know, 200, 100 episodes later? I don't know. I lose track of time. I'm time blind. Are you? Anyways, when you have ADHD, ideas come fast, and sometimes you just gotta roll with them. Honestly, this podcast was born out of my passion for understanding ADHD in a deeper way with the newest research. You see, pills don't teach skills. That's something I've learned over the years. Medication can help and is a great tool to use, but true growth, that comes from knowledge, understanding, and actionable skills. And so that's what I want to share with you. Research-backed insights, practical tips, and lived experiences of someone who's been there. Now, a little bit about me. I'm not just a host of this podcast. I'm also an early childhood special education teacher, which means I've spent years understanding how children learn, grow, and thrive in ways that work for them, especially when they're neurodiverse. And I'm also a certified life and performance coach, guiding people to unlock their full potential in both their personal and professional lives. But here's the thing that makes me a little different. I'm also a late diagnosed ADHDer. And on top of that, I self-identify as being on the autism spectrum. So when I talk about ADHD, it's not just from a professional perspective, it's from lived experience, because I get it. I know what it's like to feel like your brain is running at full speed while everyone else is moving at a different pace, and you have instructions that are in Japanese and upside down, and everybody else got them in their own language. Throughout this podcast, I'll share all kinds of insights about navigating life with ADHD, from the everyday struggles to the strengths that we can celebrate. We'll talk about everything from time management to relationships to self-advocacy, and all about how to live authentically in a world that often asks us to be anything but. Whether you have ADHD yourself or you want to understand it better, you are in the right place. So, let's get started. Hi, this is a disclaimer that I am a early childhood special education teacher. I am a certified life and performance coach, and I am a podcaster. All right, I am not a medical doctor, and none of this information should be used in supplement of a medical professional and or therapy. Hey there, and welcome to Authentically ADHD. If you are a listener of mine, welcome back. I am super excited because today we're diving into a fascinating topic that's often under-recognized, and I didn't know about it until I read about it last week. And it's called Cognitive Disengagement Syndrome, or CDS, and I will be referring to it as CDS because I don't know, the feeling of repeating cognitive disengagement syndrome over and over again makes me very nervous. So, if that name doesn't ring a bell, maybe the older label will, or maybe you have no idea what this is, just like I didn't know what it was. The thing that they used to call it was called sluggish cognitive tempo. I know, it kind of sounds like an insult that you'd hurl at a slow computer while it was, buffering. In this episode, we're pulling back the curtain on what CDS really is, why it's just not laziness or ordinary daydreaming, and why experts say it deserves far more attention than it gets. So, ever felt like your brain is running on dial-up internet in a high-speed world? You're trying to focus, but it's like there's a fog inside your head, and everything is moving in slow motion. Feels like you're wading through water. Your thoughts wander off like they've got a mind of their own, and snapping back to reality is a bit like wading through molasses. If you're nodding along, or someone you know comes to mind, you might be familiar with what we're talking about. And if you have ADHD or work with folks who do, you might see hints of this quote-unquote slow-mo attention state that often hides right in plain sight. In this next 30 minutes, we are going to cover what exactly cognitive disengagement syndrome is, the key symptoms in plain, relatable language, and how it overlaps with but isn't the same thing as ADHD, why it often gets misdiagnosed as something else, like depression or anxiety, and some practical, real-world tips for managing it later. All right, so grab a coffee and let's get ready. Are you ready? Let's get started. So what is cognitive disengagement syndrome, or as I will be referring to it as CDS throughout the rest of the podcast? First things first. In a nutshell, CDS is a term that describes a unique set of attention symptoms. Think of it as a cousin to ADHD, but with its own personality. Like it has its own diagnosis in the DSM-5, but it has a lot of overlaps. It's kind of like ASD, autism spectrum disorder, has its own personality, but it's a cousin to ADHD. It's got a lot of overlapping symptoms. It used to be known as sluggish cognitive tempo, which frankly sounds like your brain is a slow turtle or something. No surprise, experts decided to rebrand it to something a little less snarky and more accurate. Now we call it cognitive disengagement syndrome, highlighting how the mind can seem to disengage from the task at hand. So what does CDS look like? Picture a person, child or adult, who is constantly drifting off into their own world. We're talking excessive daydreaming, blank staring, zoning out as if the lights are on but nobody's home. They literally check out. Now, this happens a lot with littler kids. Kids in my preschool class do this a lot, but it's age appropriate at that age. So we're talking about children and adults. So like middle school age children to adulthood. Their mind wanders like it's on an aimless road trip. They may appear mentally foggy, sluggish in their movements, thinking, and or often slow to respond to what's happening around them. Folks with CDS often seem underactive, the opposite of hyperactive, and may be described as lethargic or a low-energy person. You might notice them blinking awake as if they literally are about to nod off. Even one moment they're tuned in, and then the next they've drifted off away from where you are on a cloud of thought. Another hallmark is being easily confused or mentally fogged. It's not that they can't understand things, it's that their processing speed is low. Imagine trying to stream a video with a weak Wi-Fi signal. The content eventually comes through, but it's laggy. Similarly, a person with CDS might take longer to process information or retrieve memories, leading to them losing their train of thought often. They may say, wait, what was I doing? Or what was I talking about? More times a day than they'd like. Here's a term researchers use that really nails it: being internally distracted. With the classic ADHD, people are often pulled by external distractions. Every noise, sight, or squirrel outside the window steals their attention. But with CDS, the distraction is coming from inside your own mind, like an internal daydream or just a blank fog that's surprisingly hard to shake. It's like their mind's attention switch is set to the off position when it should be on. They appear withdrawn or maybe even apathetic. And apathetic just means showing no emotion whatsoever, like anhedonic. And this isn't because they don't care or because their brain isn't fully engaged with what's in front of it. This has led others to mislabel them as lazy or not trying hard enough, which to me is pretty unfair because in reality, CDS is a genuine attention problem, one that's different from typical ADHD and definitely not a character flaw. Let me give you a relatable example. Think about those mornings that you just can't wake up and you stumble around in a coffee-deprived haze. You pour orange juice into your coffee mug and put your car keys in the fridge. Your brain just isn't firing on all cylinders. That's a bit of what CDS feels like all day long for some people. They're awake, but there's a persistent grogginess or dreaminess that makes every mental task feel like lifting weights in Jell-O. Now, you might be wondering how common this is. Research suggests that CDS symptoms are not rare at all. In fact, it's estimated that a significant chunk of people with ADHD, up to 40% of kids, by some estimates, also experience these CDS-type symptoms. And it's not just in kids. Adults can have CDS as well, as I mentioned, even if they never knew it had a name. Hi, that would be me. I literally used to be able to go off into daydreams so intensely that the teacher would have to bang on the table and yell my name to get me out of it. That's a little bit what CDS could look like. It's been observed in roughly 1/3 of adults diagnosed with inattentive ADHD. Now, I have combined type, so it makes sense that when I was a child, I probably presented more inattentive type, and as I grew up into an adult and I stopped masking so much, now I am more of a combined type presentation. For example, now, there are even cases of people who only have CDS without having more classic ADHD traits, and they might have gone through life just being labeled as like spacey or quiet. Usually these two things go together, but sometimes CDS can stand on its own. But here we're focusing a little bit more on CDS and how it's related to ADHD. Here's an important note. I made a mistake earlier. CDS is not officially listed as a diagnosis in the DSM-5. Sorry, that big manual of mental disorders, That means your doctor won't find cognitive disengagement syndrome as a formal label to bill your insurance. But don't let that fool you into thinking it's not real. The conception has been studied by psychologists for decades, and there's a consensus in recent research that these symptoms cluster together in a meaningful way. In other words, something is going on here beyond just normal variation in attention. So even if it's not an official diagnosis yet, many clinicians recognize CDS or SCT as a very useful description for patients who have this particular profile. So, CDS, formerly known as sluggish cognitive tempo, refers to a pattern of chronic cognitive daydreaming, mental fog, slow processing, a low initiative that can seriously affect daily life. It's like the brain's engine is always idling on neutral, not because a person is willfully tuning out, but because their brain's ability to engage is, for lack of a better term, sluggish. Now that we know what it is, let's talk about how it compares to the condition we've definitely heard of, ADHD. If you listened to that description of CDS and thought, a lot of that sounds like ADHD, you're absolutely correct. CDS has a lot of overlap with ADHD, especially the inattentive presentation. Both involve problems with attention, forgetfulness, and maybe looking off into space when you're supposed to be working or paying attention. In fact, for years, CDS, back when it was called SCT, was thought of as possibly just a subtype of ADHD. Many people with ADHD do have some CDS symptoms and vice versa. But here's the kicker. Modern research indicates that CDS and ADHD are not identical. They're more like siblings rather than twins. So now we're talking, they're a little bit closer than cousins in modern research. They're more like siblings, but they're not twins. They share some DNA, but each have their own quirks. Let's start with the obvious difference, hyperactivity. Or rather, the lack of it. ADHD famously comes with that hyperactivity and impulsivity, at least in the combined or hyperactive impulsive presentations. Those folks who are fidgety, tapping, jumping out of their seats, acting on impulse, those things, their internal motor runs fast. In contrast, people with pure CDS are the polar opposite of hyperactive. Remember, another term for this was sluggish, cognitive tempo. Instead of bouncing off the walls, someone with CDS might be melting into the walls, so to speak. Quiet, slow-moving, and passive. They're not blurting out answers in class. They're the ones that might not even be answering, even when you call on them, because their mind was elsewhere. One researcher humorously noted that it's like comparing a race car, ADHD, to a slow cruiser, CDS. One's got too much, go, and the other one, not enough. Think about how uncomfortable it must be to have both. Then there's the attention differences. Both ADHD and CDS involve attention problems, but the type of attention problem differs. Here's one way to think about it. People with ADHD can engage their attention quickly, but struggle to sustain it, especially if the thing isn't interesting or their attention is like a spotlight that flickers on other exciting things, and then it fizzles out on things that you don't like. On the other hand, people with CDS have trouble even getting that spotlight to turn on and lock onto the target in the first place. It's as if the brain's ignition switch is delayed. Once they do focus, they might actually be able to stick with it a bit, even if it's something captivating, especially if it's something captivating. But the hard part is that initial spark of attention. An ADHD study might start their homework, it says that, and then get distracted by 10 different thoughts and leave it unfinished, whereas a CDS student might sit down to do their homework and spend 30 minutes in a haze, kind of staring at the page, not knowing where to begin. Both end up with not much done, but the mental experience is different. And when they're put together, that's just really uncomfortable. Another key difference is processing speed and accuracy. ADHD folks can often think quickly, sometimes too quickly, leading to processing speed and impulsive mistakes. Someone with CDS processes information more slowly and may be prone to make more mistakes because their attention to detail is decoupled or lagging. Think of it this way. If an ADHD brain is like a flashy smartphone that sometimes loses signal, a CDS brain might look like an older phone that has a constant delay, slower to opening apps, and occasionally freezes on the screen. Both might drop your call, metaphorically speaking, but for different technical reasons. So, the symptoms look the same, but the reason behind the symptoms, kind of like the differences in ADHD and ASD, like the different reasons why we might each use stimming behaviors, right? For a person who has autism, stimming is usually something to help them emotionally regulate. When a person with ADHD is stimming, they are probably doing it out of a hyperactivity. It could even be a emotional regulation thing for their hyperactive, fidgety selves. It's the reason behind the behavior, not the behavior. Are you following me? All right. Memory and retrieval can also feel different. ADHD's inattention often looks like forgetfulness due to distraction. You didn't remember the meeting because you were busy thinking about 5 other things. In CDS, forgetfulness might come from that brain fog. The information just never fully registered or gets stuck behind that mental cloud. People with CDS often say they feel like they have brain fog or that they're in a constant daydream, which isn't typically how someone with classic ADHD would describe their attention. They might say theirs is like a ping pong ball bouncing around. I am a personal example of this. Seriously, before I was medicated for ADHD, I literally felt like I was walking through brain fog and in a constant daydream. Seriously, that's how I felt. I was forgetful because I didn't pay attention, because I was constantly in another world. I can't tell you how many times in my childhood my mother asked me if I was paying attention, or asked me why I wasn't paying attention. I could never answer her, of course. But anyways, let's talk mood and motivation overlaps. ADHD is frequently linked with externalizing behaviors, meaning some with ADHD might have impulsive anger outbursts, acting without thinking, maybe developed conduct issues, or lean toward thrill-seeking. CDS, conversely, is more often linked with internalizing tendencies, anxiety, shyness, and even depressive feelings. Why? Possibly because being in a brain fog and struggling quietly can dent your self-esteem or make social life harder, leading to withdrawal from social situations and friends. A kid with ADHD might be the class clown or the one getting in trouble. A kid with CDS is more likely to be the wallflower in the class who barely says a word. Studies consistently find that CDS-prone individuals are often socially withdrawn and shy, sometimes getting overlooked or ignored by peers. People might think that they're aloof or uninterested, but in reality, the person is just slow to respond and not catching the fast-paced flow of conversation. Meanwhile, ADHD kids are hard to ignore sometimes. They demand attention, sometimes in not so great ways, and can get actively rejected due to disruptive behavior. Again, I am an example of this. I had very few friends. I was friends with all of the different groups, but I didn't have a group of friends. I had a best friend, and most of the time I was looked over by teachers and other peers. The way that I tried to get attention with my ADHD was being a suck-up, a teacher's pet, a not-so-great way to act, and sometimes I was actively rejected, told to go sit down. But then when I tried to pay attention in class, the brain fog and the ADHD symptoms all together made it literally impossible. So socially, one tends to be invisible and other too visible. So like in CDS, you're invisible. With ADHD, you're too visible. In the middle, it's just like half of you is visible and half of you is not. I don't know. There's also an interesting personality distinction noted in the research. ADHD is often associated with being reward-seeking and novelty-loving, where CDS might come with a higher sensitivity to punishment or tendency to avoid risks. I relate to this one a lot because I seek rewards and I do love novelty, but very strict novelty. I tend to avoid risks. I don't like roller coasters or new things that I don't know what it's going to make me feel. It's like ADHD is always pressing the gas pedal and looking for something fun, but my CDS is hovering over the brake, worried about making the wrong move all at the same time. This could be one reason why we see less rule-breaking behavior in CDS, which is why I grew up and I didn't get in trouble a lot. But those individuals aren't the ones typically running towards trouble. If anything, they're stuck trying to remember what the next step was. And that was me. I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do for fun, not running towards trouble for fun. Here is some neuroscience in lay terms. We won't get too technical here, but it's worth noting that the scientists suspect that the brain mechanisms differ between the two conditions. ADHD is often tied to issues with executive functions and inhibitory control, trouble stopping impulses, difficulty with the brain's braking system. CDS seems to be more about deficits in starting and sustaining cognitive engagement, maybe a lower general arousal or alertness level in the brain. One theory is that different attention networks are involved. ADHD involves circuits that sustain attention and inhibit distractions, where CDS might involve circuits that initiate and regulate alertness. From a neurotransmitter perspective, ADHD famously involves dopamine irregularities, and with CDS, some researchers wonder if there's a component of the brain's arousal system, possibly a norepinephrine angle, since alertness is at the issue here. But the jury's still out. All right, science hat off now. The key takeaway is that inattentiveness in CDS qualitatively feels different than the garden variety ADHD distractibility. Basically, they need more research. Before we leave this section, it's important to mention that a person can have both ADHD and CDS symptoms together. This is actually pretty common, as we noted earlier, and as I described my childhood and, before being medicated. If ADHD is the cake, think of CDS as the flavor of icing that can coat it for some people. That's me. Those are the folks who might be especially struggling. For example, they have the hyperactivity or impulsivity of ADHD and the foggy drifting of CDS. On the flip side, there are some who can just have one or the other, the foggy drifting of CDS, or they are on the other side, and it makes it very, very, very tricky for doctors to decide, is this a new condition or is this part of the ADHD? But a recent consensus leads towards CDS being its own construct, not just ADHD light. In fact, a large meta-analysis of around 19,000 people found that ADHD symptoms like CDS symptoms, while often co-occurring, do factor out as distinct inattention patterns. So think of them like two circles of a Venn diagram. They overlap but in the middle, many people have both. But each also has an area that doesn't overlap, unique features that the others doesn't share. Just like ADHD and autism. I guess you could just think of CSD or CDS as the third circle. For me, that's kind of what it is. Some of my things fall under autism, some fall under CDS, some fall under ADHD, but a lot of it falls under all three. In summary, ADHD and cognitive disengagement syndrome are like two different flavors of attention deficit. ADHD is high-speed impulsive, and CDS is slow and dreamy. So, speaking of this, why is it that so many people with CDS have been flying under the radar, getting mislabeled, things like that? So, cognitive disengagement syndrome has been called unrecognized. It's been called an unrecognized condition, more specifically. And for good reason. I've never heard of it before, have you, until you listen to this podcast? It's like the introvert at the party of mental health conditions, right? It's quiet, not drawing attention to itself, and often misunderstood. So, often, as having something else like ADHD, depression, or anxiety, one big reason this gets missed is its history and awareness. Until recently, most clinicians and educators didn't have CDS on their radar at all. It wasn't a thing. If a child was struggling to pay attention, their go-to thought would be, this might be ADHD, or if the child was quiet, like very quiet and slow, the kid is depressed, has anxiety. A sluggish cognitive tempo as a term has been used and has been around for decades in research, but it never made it to the actual diagnostic statistical manual. So unlike ADHD, which every teacher, parent, or doctor has heard of, this disorder has not ever been heard of. Again, have you heard of it before now? I haven't. Now consider how CDS presents behaviorally. These individuals aren't usually causing trouble. Again, ADHD people need a lot of attention. People with ADHD seek attention. They're so bright, but they don't apply themselves. People with CDS sit quietly in the back. They try to make themselves invisible because they're half listening and half in la-la land, and they don't want to be called on. Another reason is the similarity to depression or anxiety symptoms. Think about it. If someone's constantly sluggish, low energy, apathetic, and staring off, a clinician might immediately consider depression. In fact, all of these things are key symptoms of depression as well. Anxiety, especially in kids, can sometimes look like zoning out or being in their head worrying. So it's easy to see a person as CDS might getting diagnosed with anxiety disorder or depression when at the core of the issue is an attention disengagement problem. There's a strong link between CDS symptoms and internalizing disorders like anxiety and depression, which means clinicians really have to tease them apart. I mean, as I'm talking about it, I don't even know how they tease them apart because misinterpretation by others adds to this mess. Earlier, I mentioned people with CDS might be seen as aloof or unmotivated. Let's double down on that. Friends, family, and even doctors who can wrongly attribute behavior to character traits, a child who doesn't respond quickly and seems out of it might get labeled as lazy, slow, shy, or even oppositional when they don't follow instructions, not out of defiance, but because their mind wandered off. One heartbreaking example comes from a real story. A teenage girl was so quiet and zoned out in class that teachers literally marked her absent when she was right there in her seat. Can you imagine? She was physically present, but so mentally checked out due to her CDS that she might as well not have even been there. She might have well been invisible. For years, her parents thought her issues were just from anxiety and depression, until she stumbled upon the term sluggish cognitive tempo in an old psych report, and then everything clicked. Suddenly, the excessive daydreaming, the brain fog, it all made sense. It took that long, though, for anyone to connect the dots because the default assumptions were other diagnoses. There's also a bit of controversy in the professional community that has affected recognition. Some experts have criticized the push to make CDS an official diagnosis, arguing that it might pathologize normal traits or that it is just a fragment of ADHD or other disorders. They worry about overdiagnosis. Like, are we going to start labeling every dreamy kid with a disorder? Are pharma companies going to just start looking for the next condition to medicate? And these are valid concerns. And it's good that scientists are being cautious because we don't want any of that to happen excessively. However, the flip side is that right now, it's not being recognized, right? CDS not being recognized. People who truly suffer from it might not get the specific help they need. It's a very fine line. The consensus that has emerged is that while we're debating these labels, the symptoms are very real and can be seriously impairing. So misdiagnosis happens both ways. Some get diagnosed with something else incorrectly, and some don't get diagnosed with anything at all. They're just undiagnosed and unhappy, and usually lazy, unmotivated, and useless. Now, I know that we're going to definitely go beyond my 30-minute mark, like I told you, but don't worry, we're getting to those tips soon enough here. Because as a result of the misdiagnosis, people can go years thinking they're just bad at life or lazy. They internalize a lot of that negative self-talk. A kid might grow up being scolded for daydreaming, and a teen might get told, you just need to try harder. An adult might wonder why they can't seem to hold on to thoughts in meetings when everyone else manages fine, and it can be frustrating and demoralizing. Some individuals end up on treatments that don't fully help. For instance, they may be given a stimulant medication for ADHD and find that while it might boost focus a bit, it doesn't magically clear the fog like it does for a classic ADHD case. Or they might be on an antidepressant that helps their mood, but it doesn't help their space out episodes. The bottom line is that CDS often flies under the radar, and its sufferers might not get diagnosed with something more obvious or nothing at all. The condition is unrecognized in both the medical field and public awareness. That's why one of my goals today, and the reason that you're still listening, is to shine a light on it. Because once you do recognize it, you can start doing something about it. Up to now, we've painted a pretty challenging picture. Brain fog, misdiagnoses, feeling overlooked. But don't worry. This isn't an all doom and gloom episode, like I said. In the next segment, we are going to do something empowering, talk practical tips and strategies. So stick around, because right after this word from our sponsors, we're going to dive into tips and strategies that are practical for managing CDS. Hey there, my ADHD tribe. I have an offer for you. Do you ever feel like you're constantly juggling, but somehow always dropping the ball? You're not alone. We've all been there. I struggle still to manage time, stay organized, and to keep track of the never-ending to-do list. I'm Carmen, and I get it. Trust me, that's why I have created Thriving Authentically with ADHD, Executive Functions and Coping Strategies. It's a course designed to help you take control of your ADHD brain instead of letting it control you. But here's the kicker. It's not just a course. It's a journey. For only $25, you'll get access to about 3 hours of exclusive ADHD-friendly content that breaks down the executive functions in simple terms and explains why our ADHD brain works in the way that it does. And most executive functions, most importantly, it'll teach you practical, research-backed coping strategies that you can start using today. From working memory struggles to time blindness to emotional regulation, we cover it all. Plus, you'll get a workbook in your email packed with interactive exercises to help you reflect on your own ADHD journey, track your progress, and apply what you've learned at your own pace. But that's not all. You also will get 2 personalized coaching sessions where we can dive into your specific challenges and create strategies that work for you. No more one-size-fits-all solutions, just real, authentic, tailored support. And the best part, you get all this for just $25. That's less than a cost of a meal out. Plus, with my proven strategies, you can start improving your executive function skills in no time. Imagine finally understanding your ADHD brain and learning how to thrive and not just survive. Don't wait too long. The spots are limited. Sign up today and let's get started on your journey to thriving authentically with ADHD. Hey there. If you're looking for a game changer in managing your ADHD, let me tell you about something that's made a huge impact on my life. Focused, the adult ADHD group coaching program by Kristen Carter. This isn't just another program. It's a community. It's a roadmap. It's a lifeline for adults with ADHD who want to thrive. Inside of Focus, you'll find weekly coaching calls with Kristen packed with actionable insights, a supportive community of adults who get it. They get what it's like to live with ADHD. You'll get tools and strategies that actually work for our brains. No fluff, just real results. I've been a part of Focus for over a year, and let me tell you, it's where I've learned so much of what I share with you on Authentically ADHD. It's been a game changer for me, and I think it could be for you too. And here's the best part. If you use my link to join, we both save money. It's a win-win. So if you've been looking for the right ADHD support, this is your sign to check it out. Head to the link in my show notes to learn more and sign up. Let's thrive together with tools and support that we need to succeed. Are you also loving what we're doing on Authentically ADHD but want to take your experience to the next level? Well, I have got something for you. Introducing the Authentically ADHD Patreon, your VIP pass to the ultimate ADHD support hub. As a Patreon member, you'll unlock exclusive perks like early access to every single episode, hear it before anyone else does, a treasure trove of resources that I've made, tools, guides, and worksheets to help you thrive in everyday aspects of life, direct coaching opportunities with me designed to help you harness your ADHD powers, and the cherry on top, an incredible community of like-minded individuals who just get it. You're not alone on this journey, and together we can be unstoppable. By joining Patreon, you're not just supporting the podcast, you're fueling a movement. Together, we're breaking stigmas, embracing authenticity, and creating a world where ADHD is seen as a strength and not just a struggle. So what are you waiting for? Head over to patreon.com/authenticallyaDHD and join the family today. Let's keep growing, thriving, and showing up authentically together. Hope to see you over there. Back to the show. All right, and now we can roll up our sleeves and get practical. Cognitive disengagement syndrome can make everyday tasks feel like you're swimming upstream, but there are ways to manage it and improve your day-to-day functioning. Whether you're an adult with CDS, a parent or teacher of someone who has it, or someone just listening along for knowledge, these tips will be helpful for somebody who has CDS and somebody who has ADHD or somebody who has both. Think of it as creating an environment where your brain's engine has some extra help turning over. Let's break it down. First, prioritize sleep and healthy habits. I know, this one's not glamorous, but it's a big deal. Since people with CDS can often feel drowsy or low energy, getting constant quality sleep is pretty vital. Poor sleep will only pour molasses into an already sluggish cognitive tempo. Aim for a regular sleep schedule and a good sleep hygiene. Yes, that means putting down the phone at night and maybe actually trying to go to bed on time. This is a really big ask, I know. Also, just pay attention to your diet and moving your body, aka exercise. Physical activity can temporarily boost alertness. Even just a brisk walk or a few jumping jacks when you feel foggy can restart the engine. When I start tripping over words, like doing this podcast, I pause it. I stop recording and I do some jumping jacks, or I go get some water, or I check in with my body, and it helps me. Eating balanced meals and staying hydrated helps too. Blood sugar crashes, and dehydration can worsen with that spaced out feeling when you're dehydrated. Let me just tell you, I know from experience. Some folks find that a bit of caffeine in moderation helps shake off the cobwebs, but be careful not to overdo it, especially if you have anxiety. Think of healthy habits as the foundation. They're not going to eliminate anything, but they're going to raise your baseline energy and brain health, giving you a fighting chance on those heavy brain fog days. Use external structures to stay on track. If the issue is that your brain disengages internally, one solution is external engagement. This is a big thing with ADHD. This means using tools and routines to keep you anchored to your tasks. It means externalizing your brains. For example, timers, alarms. They can be your best friend. Visual reminders are great too. Post-it notes in key places, a big wall calendar, phone reminders that pop up with messages that say, hey, are you on task? Reminding you what time it is, taking up your entire screen. These act like gentle taps on the shoulder for your wandering mind. Checklists can also be magic when you're in a fog. It's easy to forget the steps. So having a checklist with your morning routine, your work tasks, and each little routine within a routine inside of it gives you a concrete roadmap to follow when autopilot fails. Basically, take what you might normally stay in your head, where it can kind of drift away, and put it out in the world where it can cue you physically. Now, we do this in my preschool classroom for some students individually, but I do it for the whole entire class because they don't really have a sense of time and they like to know what comes next. We have an overall schedule, and then in each routine, I have the steps of the routine, like how to wash your hands. Yes, turn on the water, rinse hands, get soap. Those are all steps. So do the same thing for yourself. And no, it doesn't have to look like a little kid schedule. Make it pretty. Use stickers. Make it personalized. And break those tasks into bite-sized pieces or micro tasks and make it visual. Make it concrete. Sometimes I tell folks with attention issues to use the 5-minute rule to do tasks when they can't get started and get that momentum. After that, you have permission to stop if it's torture. But usually what happens after 5 minutes is not so bad, and you do continue and end up getting more done than you thought. But giving yourself that out at the beginning can lower a barrier to entry or starting the task. Engage interest to spark your attention. By nature, CDS makes it hard to generate interest or focus out of thin air. So, there's a way to make a task more interesting. Do it. For example, if you need to study or work on something, do laundry, try turning it into a game or incorporating a topic you love. Some people with CDS find that tying an activity to a strong interest or novelty helps them engage. If you have to do dull paperwork, maybe some energizing but not too distracting music in the background, or you can use a fun pen. It sounds silly, but little tweaks like using the right pen. If I'm not using my Papermate Flare pens and writing in my own personal little color code, you can forget about it. I'm not going to want to journal if I just have a black pen. How boring. Like, at least give me a colored pen. Come on. You know? So, essentially, you're trying to jumpstart your mind by making the external environment more stimulating or appealing. Teachers can use this trick too. I use it. If a student with CDS or a student is in preschool and they zone out a lot, maybe relating a thing that has these students' favorite hobbies, characters, or using hands-on activities can reel them back in, which is why we do play-based learning in preschool. Scheduling mind-wandering breaks. This one might surprise you, but it can help, and I definitely do it. If you know you're going to zone out anyway, try to harness it. Schedule brain breaks where you know you can actually allow yourself to daydream and check out for a few minutes between work sessions or when you can. For instance, work for 25 minutes and then take a 5-minute zone out break. Stare at the wall, let your thoughts drift, grab a glass of water, but use a timer to cap it so it doesn't turn into an accidental 1-hour trance. Make sure the timer is either visible, audible, or both. This way your brain gets a bit of the wandering that it craves, but in a very controlled way. It's like giving the disengagement monster a little treat so that it behaves for a little while longer. And you can do this as many times as you feel you need to. Communication and cues in schools or at work. If you're an educator or even a manager of an employee who shows these symptoms, it's a bit of an understatement. A bit of understanding goes a long way. Rather than writing the person off as inattentive or lazy, consider the subtle report. For example, an employee who shows these symptoms, like a teacher could place the student with CDS near the front of the classroom to minimize the physical distance from the action. Sometimes just proximity helps pull us back. They may also gently cue the student with a question or tap on their desk when they see the student is drifting off, not to embarrass them, instead of, slamming on the desk and yelling my name. I don't blame her at all. I now find it very funny that she did that, but I do see now how it could have been embarrassing. I didn't take it as embarrassing. I really just needed to re-engage, but this is a better way to re-engage students without embarrassing them. Provide written instruction in addition to spoken ones can help too. Remember that processing speed we talked about? Listening to something while reading it is really helpful. Then, open communication. It is key. And I've used it. Sometimes just saying, hey, I have a tendency to zone out. If you see me staring into space, please feel free to check in with me. I'm really not doing it on purpose. It's the way my brain's wired. Or, hey, could you send me the notes for that meeting afterwards? I tend to zone out because of my invisible disability and the way my brain works, so I would really appreciate it if you could do that. This can clear the air and invite support instead of criticism. Therapy and coaching are also professional supports that can make huge differences. Cognitive behavioral therapy, for instance, can develop better organizational habits and challenge negative self-talk while developing strategies for positive self-talk and to stay engaged. Coaches can help you with tailored things to the individual person with accountability. For kids working with a different coach, they could work on different subjects or work on social things. If we are an adult, you can set cues in your work life, in your home life, in your social life, whatever you need to work on. And a coach can help you learn strategies and self-advocacy. Then there's medication, and this is a case-by-case basis. Again, I'm not a doctor. This is a tricky area, and I'll emphasize talk to a professional about this. Since CDS isn't officially in the books, there's no gold standard medication for it. However, because of the overlap with ADHD, sometimes stimulant medications like those for ADHD are tried to help to see if they can help with focus. This is kind of narcolepsy, I'm pretty sure is in the DSM-5. I'm not saying that, don't quote me, but they use ADHD medication because it's a stimulant for the brain to help people who have narcolepsy. Now, I'm going to tell you that when they put me on a stimulant instead of the non-stimulant for ADHD, it was like putting on glasses and unfolding and untying the knot of a brain that I had. This is how I can kind of tell that I have both. Then it also lowered my social anxieties and helped me pay attention in those social areas. And therapies helped me with my autistic things that I struggle with. So the results are mixed. Stimulants tend to be less effective for pure CDS symptoms than they are for classical ADHD and CDS symptoms. Some people see mild improvement in alertness, and others don't notice much change on the foggy daydreaming front. It solved a lot for me personally, but I'm just one person who believes that I have both. I have not even, a therapist said that I could have CDS, and we just went about a few strategies that help. There has been an interest in non-stimulant meds too. One example is atomoxetine, the brand name Strattera, a non-stimulant ADHD med, which was actually studied in clinical trials specifically for symptoms of this SCT or CDS, for this disorder, specifically. And if you're inattentive presenting even as an adult and you have CDS, atomoxetine is probably, I won't say perfect, but a pretty good medication for you if it works. And it really makes sense since atomoxetine targets selective norepinephrine, which is related to alertness. And it doesn't really touch your serotonin, but your norepinephrine does influence your dopamine. The jury's still out on how well that it works, but if a person has co-occurring anxiety or depression, doctors may prescribe anti-anxiety, antidepressants, or atomoxetine, which could directly help all of these symptoms. So, it's absolutely not one size fits all. So medical management has to be very, very personalized, importantly because CDS folk can be sensitive to medication. Just anecdotally, a super sluggish system might react differently. Any med approach should start low and go slow, and under supervision of a medical professional. Next one, build on strengths and interests. This is more of a general life tip too, but it's worth mentioning. People with ADHD and CDS often have a rich inner world. All that daydreaming isn't always unproductive. It can also foster creativity. They might excel in creative arts, imaginative storytelling, or areas that don't require them to be on a strict high-speed timeline. Leaning into these strengths can boost confidence and provide a sense of accomplishment that counteracts the negative feelings from struggling in other areas. For example, a child with CDS loves drawing and can focus on doing art. Encourage that even when you're using it as a gateway to other learning. Draw scenes from a history lesson, for instance. Draw out the math problem. And if you're an adult who hyper-focuses on a hobby, schedule that hobby as a reward after doing less interesting chores. Harnessing the power of interest as a natural motivator is... Let's start that sentence again. Harness the power of interest as a natural motivator. It's often the best antidote to disengagement. The next one is going to be something I say a lot. Patience and compassion. Okay, this one's not a hack per se, but it's a strategy, and it is important. Managing all of this is a journey, for lack of a better word. There will be days where things click. Great days. And then there's going to be bad days and terrible days where the brain fog rolls in thick. And then there'll be days in the middle. It's crucial for both the person with CDS and those around them to maintain an attitude of patience and understanding. Beating yourself up about it only adds anxiety. Ugh, I'm spacing out again. What's wrong with me? This can just make you feel worse. And it can actually make your attention worse. Instead, practice a little bit of self-compassion, reminding yourself or your student or child that this is a real cognitive pattern and it's okay. It's not a moral failing and there's nothing wrong with them. With encouragement and positivity, it helps them to have better motivation to reset and try again rather than dwelling on the problems. Mental habits of resilience make a big difference in the long run. All right, we've been through a lot. That's a lot of tips, but that's because managing CDS and or ADHD often requires a multi-pronged approach, and it's key to create structure and stimulation in the environment to compensate for internal disengagement and to take care of the body and mind so that you are in the best shape to combat those symptoms. Remember, what works for one person doesn't work for another. So it's about experimenting and finding the right mix of what works for you. So as we wrap up, let's hit the high notes of what we've learned about cognitive disengagement syndrome, CDS, and why it matters. We learned that it's a phenomenon characterized by persistent daydreaming, mental fog, slow processing, and low energy levels. It's essentially an under-the-radar attention problem where the brain has trouble engaging. It often co-occurs with ADHD and has a distinct feature that sets it apart. Unlike the zippy ADHD impulsive ADHD profile, CDS is the slow burner, internally distracted, not externally hyper. And it's unrecognized. This means a lot of people who do have it don't even know they have it. So, if you're nodding along with this episode a lot in agreement, I do have a follow along or a guide, reflection, if you have it, in the show notes to help you with the self-awareness, because lack of self-awareness historically is part of the overlap with other conditions such as ADHD. So using one of those guides or using the guide that I provided while going through this episode might help you actively process it, to help you acknowledge symptoms, whatever you want to call them, but give them attention and understanding. Third, because it's not an official diagnosis yet, there's no one-size-fits-all solution, but there are ways to manage it effectively, and we went through a bunch of practical strategies, getting the good sleep, using timers, and all of that stuff. Now, a few key takeaways to remember, like consider these. If you remember nothing else, remember this. You're not lazy or daydreamy. It's a genuine cognitive pattern. It overlaps with ADHD, but they're not the same thing. It's very under-recognized, and people don't even know they have it, but that doesn't make it unimportant. And managing CDS is absolutely possible. It's just very personal. Before we sign off, I want to leave you with some encouragement. If you identified with CDS from our discussion, you might feel a mix of relief, like, oh, this really describes me, and maybe a tinge of sadness or frustration. Why didn't I know sooner? And why is there something else wrong with me? This is normal. Remember, knowledge is power and self-awareness is the key. Simply knowing that there's a name for this pattern can be a huge first step. It means that there are others out there like you. Indeed, communities are forming and people are sharing their experiences. Since this is such an unknown topic, I would love for you to share this episode. Share your experiences and explain it to the loved ones and people around you. For educators and allies listening, I hope that this opens your eyes to the quiet student in the back or the employee who seems checked out but is actually trying their best behind that blank stare. A little bit of understanding and support from you can make a massive difference in that person's life. Sometimes it's as simple as asking, hey, I noticed you seem a little distracted. Is there anything I can do to help you to engage, or offering to repeat information without judgment? In closing, cognitive disengagement syndrome may not have the household name status of ADHD or anxiety, but it's very real and it affects a lot of people in profound ways. By bringing it into the light, we take a step towards better taking care of ourselves, less stigma, and more empathy for those whose minds wander, not out of willfulness, but out of an inner-born cognitive rhythm, literally a differently wired brain. The more we recognize it, the more research will flourish, and the better we can help folks with ADHD and CDS not feel like they just need to get by, but like they can truly thrive. Thank you so much for hanging in there through this deep dive for me. Again, this was a long one, but I hope you found this episode informative, maybe a bit entertaining, and most of all, empowering. If your brain tends to drift away on its own journey, I see you. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast or hit follow so that you never miss a new episode. Stay tuned for our next episode. They come out every week, or sometimes just for a surprise, for some extra dopamine. Share this with a friend who it might help, or share it with somebody who loves you and you may not know how to form the words yet to explain this. Send it to them, or if you share it on your socials, make sure you tag me at authenticallyADHD_podcast. Take care and be kind to yourselves. Until next time, stay authentic and we will talk soon.